Hey everyone, welcome back to Global Power Pulse. Imagine for a second that you're a mobilized soldier, right? You're being sent to the front lines, told you're part of this grand breakthrough. But as you step into the muddy trenches of Stepnohursk, there's this terrifying number hanging over your head that you just can't ignore: 12 minutes. Today's explainer is diving deep into how the global drone revolution is completely rewriting the rules of warfare and why that terrifying 12-minute countdown dictates the modern battlefield. 12 minutes. That is the current average survival time for a Russian soldier in that specific sector. Think about that. It's the absolute clearest sign yet that Putin's manpower strategy has officially hit a massive brick wall. I mean, for over 3 years, the Kremlin has relied on a strategy of pure attrition. Basically, this idea that they could just outlast Ukraine by throwing more bodies at the problem. But right now, the math is finally, decisively turning against them. Just look at the sheer scale of it. In just the first 4 months of 2026, Russia has seen nearly 130,000 of its soldiers killed or wounded. To put that into perspective, they lost 70,000 men in March and April alone. And here is where they hit that wall we talked about. Even with signing bonuses worth tens of thousands of dollars, Russia's recruitment rate has tanked by about 20%. Dmitry Medvedev claims they're pulling in 27,000 contract soldiers a month. Well, okay, but when you're losing 35,000 men in that same time frame, you are in deep net loss territory. So for the first time since the Kursk operation back in 2024, Russia's actually losing more land than it's taking. So to understand why the front line has turned into such a mathematical nightmare, we really need to wrap our heads around this new paradigm: expendable warfare. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a brand new military doctrine where quantity mathematically defeats quality. The old era of protecting a billion-dollar asset at all costs, that's fading fast. Instead, modern militaries are deliberately sacrificing massive quantities of super cheap, disposable unmanned systems to overwhelm and completely deplete expensive enemy defenses. It literally makes traditional military supremacy completely obsolete. To truly grasp this massive shift, we're going to take a bit of a global tour in this explainer. We'll start with Japan's cardboard drone fleets, check out Iran's swarm tactics in the Gulf, and then head back to Eastern Europe to see how Ukraine is completely shattering the myth of the Moscow fortress before we lay out the new rules of war. All right, let's jump straight into the dawn of expendable warfare and Japan's cardboard fleet. We're transitioning over to the Pacific, where Japan is actually preemptively adapting its entire naval doctrine. They are facing an increasingly aggressive Chinese fleet, and Tokyo has a huge demographic problem: a rapidly declining population of young sailors. They simply cannot afford a traditional manpower-heavy war. Usually, traditional naval doctrine tells you to protect your billion-dollar destroyers and aircraft at all costs. But Tokyo's got a radical new plan. They are producing these flat-packed, corrugated cardboard drones, kind of inspired by the Australian designs we saw used in Ukraine. The whole goal is to deliberately sacrifice swarms of these cheap $2,000 cardboard decoys to totally paralyze giant Chinese radar systems and drain their multi-million-dollar air defense ammunition. I mean, cardboard against a billion-dollar destroyer. And this isn't just some sci-fi concept on paper. It's a heavily funded reality right now. Japan has allocated a staggering $1.9 billion for its 2026 defense budget, specifically dedicated to unmanned systems. We're talking about crazy tech like the Air Kamui 150. It's a drone that literally comes flat-packed in a box, you assemble it in 5 minutes, and it flies autonomously to its target. It is quite literally an expendable insurance policy for an aging nation. Okay, let's pivot over to Iran's Gulf swarm tactics, because the Pacific isn't the only region completely changing the game. Over in the Middle East, Iran is utilizing this exact same cheap, asymmetric tech to effectively hold the Strait of Hormuz, and by extension, global energy markets completely hostage. See, for years, Iran's primary naval threat was sea mines. But recently, U.S. Central Command effectively wiped out 90% of Iran's sea mine stock. They destroyed about 7,200 of them. Having lost the waters, Tehran completely pivoted to the skies. They rapidly ramped up their attack drone production to an active capacity of 10,000 drones per month. Their new strategy is to launch these cheap drone swarms specifically to force the U.S. to burn through its highly expensive Patriot and THAAD missiles. And these cheap swarms, they have created absolute international chaos. We've seen hundreds of attacks on U.S. bases and Gulf infrastructure, and that has sent global shipping insurance premiums absolutely through the roof. It's gotten so intense that regional powers have completely abandoned their strategic patience, with Saudi Arabia and the UAE even conducting secret counter-airstrikes. But here's the catch. Building thousands of drones is putting massive strain on the already heavily sanctioned Iranian economy. It's pushing Tehran right to a crossroads. Do they orchestrate a controlled retreat or risk a massive escalation? Let's bring it back to Ukraine's frontline drone dominance. Returning to Eastern Europe, we can finally dissect exactly why the front lines have become an absolute meat grinder and why those Russian troops we talked about earlier are facing that terrifying 12-minute survival window. So the nature of casualties has fundamentally changed in a way we've never really seen before. Tiny, explosive-laden FPV drones, first-person view aircraft, are now responsible for roughly 80% of Russian casualties. Think about that. 80%. Because these incredibly agile little drones are specifically hunting individual soldiers and medical evacuation teams, rescue missions have become a complete suicide mission. It's so dangerous that Russian units are often forced to simply abandon their wounded right there on the battlefield. And that leads us to this completely unprecedented flip. Usually, in most modern wars, you'd expect to see maybe 2 or 3 wounded soldiers for every one death. But on this front line, that ratio has completely inverted. Russia is suffering nearly 2 deaths for every single wounded soldier. It's a direct, brutal result of this expendable drone lethality entirely denying basic medical logistics. This is creating what military analysts are calling the last-mile nightmare. Russian commanders have bluntly admitted that 90% of their losses are happening in that final stretch of logistics before the troops even reach the actual combat zone. It's gotten so bad that they've literally had to stop using armored vehicles for transport because they're just too big and easy for drones to spot. Instead, they're desperately trying to move supplies on motorcycles and open trailers, which, as you can guess, offers absolutely zero protection. We saw the ultimate result of this tactical collapse in the village of Odradne. Now, Russia had held that area for 6 months as a big part of their steady gains narrative. But in a matter of days, Ukraine's 129th Brigade came in and used this incredible signature model of tactics to completely clear the village and surrounding forests. Step 1, drone mapping and electronic jamming totally blinded the Russians. Step 2, precision artillery suppressed them. Step 3, mechanized infantry swept right in. The Russian defense didn't just bend there, it absolutely shattered. Soldiers were literally abandoning their posts and fleeing, which is a scene we are seeing become a growing pattern across the entire front. Moving on to shattering the Moscow fortress. Because, the impact of expendable warfare isn't just limited to the mud of the trenches. We are moving from the granular, tactical front line to massive, strategic deep strikes, targeting the very brain of the Russian war machine. 600. That is the staggering number of autonomous drones that simultaneously attacked the heavily defended Moscow Oblast on the night of May 17, 2026. For years, the Kremlin had portrayed Moscow as this impenetrable fortress, an island entirely isolated from the harsh reality of the war. But in a single night, 600 drones shattered that illusion forever. And these swarms didn't just hit empty fields. They went straight for the industrial jugular. When Ukraine struck the Elma Technopark and the Angstrom facilities in Zelenograd, they weren't just hitting random buildings, they were taking out the critical microchip production lines that Putin desperately needs to build his smart weapons, like the Iskander and Kinjal missiles. They also hit the Raduga Machine Design Bureau, the Kapotnia oil refinery, and even locked down aviation logistics at Sheremetyevo Airport. Between the loss of technical expertise back home and the literal exhaustion of the infantry on the front, the Kremlin is seriously running out of ways to maintain any offensive momentum. Just look at how Ukraine technologically evolved to achieve this. In 2024, they were launching individual isolated attacks on oil refineries. By 2025, they scaled up to small group drone attacks. But by 2026, they utilized coordinated 600 drone swarms that were mathematically designed to completely overwhelm Russia's world-class S-400 air defense systems. A missile battery can only track a limited number of targets, right? So flood the sky with cheap drones, and the real munitions just slip right past the shield. So let's look at the new rules of war. The crucial point here is, what does this all mean? What happens when we pull all this together, from the Pacific to the Gulf to Eastern Europe? The core thesis of our explainer today is really this. The era of billion-dollar military supremacy is officially over. Whether we are talking about Japanese cardboard decoys built to exhaust Chinese destroyers, Iranian swarms harassing global shipping channels, or Ukrainian fiber-optic FPVs tearing through Russian logistics, the math is undeniable. Expensive legacy defenses are simply being bled dry. Armies must adapt to skies darkened by cheap, disposable technology, or they face complete strategic collapse. which leaves Putin with a terrifying dilemma. A full mobilization would be political suicide, and his current recruitment drive is completely failing to keep up with the drones. The myth of the impenetrable fortress is fading, not just on the front lines, but right in the minds of the Russian people who are seeing their sons sent into a 12-minute survival lottery. But I really want to hear from you. Do you think Russia will be forced into a controlled retreat to save what's left of its army? Or will the Kremlin double down on a final, incredibly risky escalation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay on top of these shifting global power dynamics, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. For those of you on the go, you can also find our full analyses over on Spotify. Thanks for watching Global Power Pulse, and we'll see you in the next explainer.